There's a kind of silence that follows the news of a market crash. Not the silence on the stock floor, not the muted hum of financial analysts hedging their forecasts, but the deeper, colder silence that settles into a person's chest. You know the one. When you refresh your portfolio and the numbers bleed red. When the headlines scream recession and your plans for the future quietly, almost politely, begin to rearrange themselves into a smaller, dimmer version of what you had hoped. That silence, that stillness, Marcus Aurelius knew it well. Not from charts or closing bells, but from plague, famine, betrayal, and the slow collapse of an empire he was sworn to hold upright. He was emperor during the Antonine Plague, a time of mass death, economic paralysis, and social fragmentation. Rome bled from within, and still Marcus wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Not control over outcomes, not mastery of markets, just the mind, the only throne that no bear market can unseat." That's where we begin, not in the chaos of Wall Street, but in the calm of a Roman study, where a man facing ruin chose reflection over reaction. But let's bring it home. The financial storm isn't ancient history. It's what you felt when your retirement fund lost 15% last month. It's what your friend didn't say when they cancelled dinner, again, because money's tight. It's what your gut tells you when the bills pile faster than the deposits. And the truth is, many people lose more in their reaction than in the reality. Not because they're weak, but because no one taught them that emotional clarity is financial strength. Behavioral science confirms what Stoicism always knew. Daniel Kahneman called it loss aversion. Our brains react twice as strongly to losing $100 as they do to gaining the same amount. We panic, overcorrect, sell low, buy high, and then blame ourselves for the cycle. But Marcus would say, it's not the crash that robs you. It's the fear. It's the belief that your dignity lives in digits, that your value falls when the market does. So ask yourself, who do you become in a downturn? Are you the panicked soldier, rushing into the noise, firing at shadows? Or the disciplined general, watching the battlefield from stillness, choosing when to move and when to wait? Because here's the truth. Markets collapse, economies shrink, history repeats. But your mind, if trained, can remain unshaken. That is the Stoic promise. Not comfort, not certainty, but control of the only thing that ever really mattered. Let's begin. There is a desperation that hides behind urgency, a pressure in the chest that says, do something, anything. When markets fall, that voice grows louder. It whispers from news apps, shouts from social media, stirs restlessly in your late-night thoughts. You scroll, you compare, you calculate, and then too often, you react. Not from clarity, but from the ache of uncertainty. You move your money not because it's wise, but because standing still feels unbearable. Yet Marcus Aurelius reminds us, be like the cliff against which the waves continually break. It stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. But how many of us, in those moments, act more like driftwood than cliff, tossed by every fluctuation, every forecast, every flicker of market noise? Here's the quiet truth. Most everyday investors don't lose to the market. They lose to themselves. A study from Dalbar shows that retail investors consistently underperform the very funds they invest in. Not because they chose the wrong assets, but because they couldn't sit still. They sold at the bottom. They bought at the top. They chase performance like a child chasing waves, never realizing that the tide moves on its own rhythm. There's a bias at play here. Two, in fact. The action bias, the illusion that movement equals progress. And the recency effect, the tendency to believe that what just happened will keep happening. You see a drop, you assume more drops will follow, so you sell. You feel clever for a moment. But what you've actually done is break your own compass. You've let fear redraw your financial map. And yet, the answer is not inaction for the sake of passivity. Stoicism never preached apathy. What it teaches is the power of anchored stillness, not doing nothing, but doing the right thing at the right time, with a calm heart and clear eyes. There is strength in pause. That's why I ask you this. When the next shock comes, and it will, could you wait 48 hours before reacting? Not 2 weeks, not forever, just 2 days. Enough time to breathe, to write, to log your emotions like a Stoic would. Fear, impulse, clarity. Track the difference between them. You may find that your wisest decision is not a trade, but a decision not to trade at all. Stillness is not weakness, it is discipline. And discipline is a form of love, for your future self, for your family, for your peace of mind. Let others run, let others shout. You will stand like the cliff. There's a strange comfort in prediction, even false ones. We cling to forecasts, models, charts with upward arrows, because to admit we don't know is to admit we're exposed. Naked before uncertainty. And yet, every seasoned investor, every emperor who's faced famine or war, learns this. The storm does not ask your permission. It arrives. It stays as long as it pleases. It reshapes the landscape, and then, eventually, it leaves. What we often mistake for wisdom is just the illusion of control. We convince ourselves that if we read enough headlines, track enough prices, follow enough experts, we can outmaneuver chaos. But Marcus Aurelius led Rome during one of its darkest periods, and even he knew the grain would rot, the soldiers would fall ill, and the markets of his time, trade, taxes, gold, would fluctuate beyond his command. He wrote not to change the world, but to change himself within it. That's the essence of what Epictetus called the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to us, others are not. A timeless compass for those walking through financial fog. You cannot control inflation, or interest rates, or the next headline that shatters global confidence. But you can control what principles guide you through it, whether you react from fear or stand rooted in a long view, whether you sell your peace for temporary relief, or whether you trust the slow path of discipline. There is a story, not uncommon, of a man who, in 2008, watched his portfolio plummet. He panicked, liquidated everything, and vowed never to invest again. The market recovered. He didn't. Not because he lost money, but because he lost trust in time, in discipline, in himself. He had bet on control and discovered it was an illusion. And when that illusion shattered, so did his courage. What if, instead of trying to predict the storm, we prepared our vessel, not with more data, but with inner equipment, an inner market map, one that doesn't flash red with every drop, but glows with reminders, courage, temperance, perspective, one that doesn't show hourly prices, but daily choices aligned with deeper values. What if your dashboard tracked not just returns, but virtues? Because in the end, your portfolio is not your identity. Your wealth is not your worth. What makes a captain isn't how well he avoids the waves, but how he navigates when they rise. The storm is coming, always. The question is, will you meet it with noise or with nerve? There is a particular voice that rises when money falls. It does not shout, it whispers. You should have seen this coming. It rewinds the past, magnifies your mistakes, and twists uncertainty into shame. This voice is not reason, it is ego. And in times of financial pain, ego often masquerades as foresight. It wants to believe it could have predicted the crash, avoided the dip, timed the market just right. Not because it cares about the portfolio, but because it fears being seen as wrong, as foolish, as vulnerable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't waste time arguing what a good man should be one." He knew that identity, when built on applause or performance, becomes fragile in crisis. The ego clings to status, to the idea of being smart, ahead of the curve, invincible to loss. But losses do not respect intelligence. Markets do not ask for your resume. Even Warren Buffett, a model of discipline, reminds us, temperament trumps IQ. And temperament is born not from pride, but from practiced humility. A crash doesn't create insecurity, it reveals it. It unmasks the parts of us that tied our value to our salary, our net worth, our ability to always know better. And in that exposure, there is a gift, if we're willing to receive it, the gift of truth. The truth that we are not our wins, that fear is not failure. That identity built on control will crumble with every fluctuation. Imagine standing before a mirror just after your investments took a hit. Do you see an investor, or do you see a person mourning status, recognition, identity? Because it matters, not just psychologically, but financially. The decisions we make from wounded ego tend to be rash, reactive, defensive, selling to prove a point, buying to reclaim pride. Ego does not seek wisdom, it seeks relief. So ask quietly, who in me is panicking? Is it the part that manages risk, or the part that hates looking wrong? Is it the voice of prudence, or the shadow of ego trying to patch a hole in its reflection? When markets tremble, the Stoic doesn't just protect wealth, he protects character, because money lost can be regained. But peace, once surrendered to the ego, takes longer to recover. And that recovery begins with a single courageous step, admitting that not every fear needs to be answered. Some simply need to be seen and then released. There comes a moment, after the panic, after the analysis, when what remains is a question of values, not returns, not interest rates, but character. In the Stoic view, wealth is not a trophy, but a test, not something to grip with pride, but something to hold lightly, with clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." That's not indifference, that's maturity, the kind that sees money not as possession, but as stewardship. And that shift, subtle but seismic, changes how we navigate financial storms. Because resilience, in this light, is not just about bouncing back. It's about standing rooted in a deeper ethic, one that refuses to let temporary numbers rewrite permanent values. When markets fall, you don't just see volatility, you see what you've anchored your worth to. If your portfolio collapses and your self-esteem follows, the problem isn't just financial, it's philosophical. We are also haunted by a silent force, the sunk cost fallacy. We hold on to bad investments, not because they still make sense, but because we feel guilty letting go. We think, I've already lost so much, I can't quit now. But that's not discipline. That's emotional attachment disguised as logic. It's like staying in a broken relationship just because you once believed in it. Wisdom isn't loyal to the past, it's loyal to truth. There's a man, middle-aged, quiet, deliberate, who once held a stock that was drowning in losses. He refused to sell, not because he believed in its recovery, but because he couldn't forgive himself for being wrong. Years later, when he finally let go, he didn't reinvest in another stock. He redirected the funds into caregiving for his mother. Loss on paper, gain in life. The numbers fell. His clarity rose. Sometimes wealth returns in a different form. That's why it's worth asking, is your money aligned with your values, or is it just orbiting your ego? This is where virtue-based allocation begins, not with spreadsheets, but with silence, with the honest audit of where your money actually goes and what it reflects about you. Because in the end, financial resilience is not built from tactics alone, it is shaped by character. And character, when tested, is revealed in what we choose to protect: reputation or integrity, status or truth, performance or peace. Only one of those will hold when the storm returns. There is a silence that comes not from fear, but from clarity. The kind of silence that follows destruction. When the noise has faded and the smoke lifts and you're left standing in the ashes of what once was. A job lost, an account drained, a plan postponed. In that silence, something unusual happens. You begin to see what really mattered and what was just decoration. That is the gift hidden in every financial collapse, the brutal gift of truth. Marcus Aurelius, whose empire faced not only disease but economic decay, understood this stripping away. He wrote, "Often, injustice lies in what you don't do, not just what you do." And perhaps that's the deeper question we must ask when markets fall. Not just what we should have done, but what we ignored. What illusions we let grow unchecked. What distractions we called goals. What impulses we mistook for freedom. Market crashes, like forest fires, burn fast and without permission. But they also clear underbrush. They expose the roots. They reveal what was never healthy to begin with. That subscription we never needed. That car bought more for image than function. That career path that paid well but cost us peace. It's in crisis that clutter falls away. And in that burned space, something more durable can be planted. Morgan Housel once wrote, "Wealth is what you don't see." And it's true. You don't see the couple who chose not to upgrade their home so they could retire early. You don't see the mother who skipped a vacation to build a cushion for her child's future. You don't see the man who walks instead of leases a car because his peace is worth more than his posture. These are quiet victories, and they grow stronger in chaos, not weaker. So if the market crashes, ask not only what you've lost. Ask what has been cleared, what false beliefs were exposed, what unnecessary burdens burned away, and then build something from that space, something still, something true. Begin with this, a stoic emergency fund, not just cash, but clarity, a written set of principles, 3 sentences that will guide you the next time panic calls your name. Perhaps, I do not sell in fear. I protect my future self. I will stand where others run, because the purpose of pain is not punishment. It's purification, and if you let it, every crash can become a cleansing fire, not the end of your wealth story, but the beginning of its most honest chapter. Eventually, every storm ends. The charts begin to climb. The panic fades into background noise. People start to smile again at supermarkets, and the language of recovery replaces recession. But here lies the deeper challenge. Will you emerge merely having survived, or having changed? Marcus Aurelius didn't just endure the Antonine Plague. He led through it with a kind of moral gravity that remains timeless. He didn't beg the storm to end. He studied it. He stood inside it with virtue as his compass. And when it passed, he had become something rarer than victorious. He had become sovereign. Not over Rome, but over himself. This is the moment where many people relax their guard. They return to habits as if nothing happened. They celebrate the rebound, but forget the rupture. And in doing so, they forfeit the transformation. But Stoicism calls us to something deeper than recovery. It calls us to reintegration, where wisdom isn't a concept, but a practice. What does that look like with your money? It means you buy, not because others are buying, but because you have thought long and clearly. You hold through discomfort, not to prove toughness, but because courage, without consistency, is noise. You spend not to impress, but to express temperance. And you share, because justice without generosity is theory. The 4 cardinal virtues, wisdom, courage, temperance, justice, are not philosophical ornaments. They are daily actions. You embody them in how you check your bank account, in the decisions you make about housing, insurance, education, in how you respond to market headlines, in how you treat those around you when times are tight. Daniel Kahneman, reflecting on decades of research, offered this simple but piercing insight. Our emotions hijack our logic more often than we admit, but the wisest among us aren't those who feel nothing. They are those who feel and still choose well. They slow down. They breathe. They choose principle over panic. This is the bridge from survival to sovereignty, not just enduring the next crash, but welcoming it as an opportunity to prove who you really are. Not just fixing a budget, but becoming the kind of person for whom chaos is no longer a threat, because your compass no longer depends on the weather. The next time a storm rises, remember this: the market is not your identity. Your losses are not your shame. And your discipline, quiet, steady, unseen, is your greatest form of power. Sovereignty is not given. It is earned in silence, in storms, in the choices no one else sees. Let this be the moment you reclaim it. When all is said and sold, the market will rise again. It always has. But the more pressing question isn't whether your portfolio will recover. It's whether you will. Whether you'll rise not just with your assets, but with your awareness. Whether this financial storm will leave you bitter, bruised and cautious, or whether it will leave you sharper, deeper, more anchored in what cannot be shaken. You are not the market. You are the captain. And captains are not judged by calm seas, but by the steadiness of their hand when the waves are high and the stars are hidden. Marcus Aurelius could not end the plague. He could not promise safety. But he did offer something far more enduring: serenity in the face of uncertainty, clarity in the midst of collapse, and the reminder that real power lies not in prediction, but in principle. So take the Stoic virtues, not as ancient ornaments, but as financial disciplines. Let wisdom guide your analysis. Let courage guide your patience. Let temperance shape your spending. And let justice lead you to care, to share, to remember that wealth hoarded without purpose is just another form of fear. Remember Daniel Kahneman's warning. We don't make bad decisions because we're uninformed. We make them because emotion hijacks the wheel. But you can change that. Not by becoming cold, but by becoming emotionally literate. By recognizing the surge of fear and not obeying it. By seeing the urge to act and asking, is this clarity or compulsion? So let this crash, whether it's in your portfolio or your plans, become your teacher. Let it reveal what your spreadsheets never could. Let it strip away the noise and leave only what matters: your principles, your peace, your path forward. If this video spoke to something real in you, type the word resilience in the comments. Let it be your declaration that fear will not guide your next decision, that storms may shake your finances, but not your foundation. This video is for educational purposes only. Always consider your circumstances with care. Now breathe, stand still. The storm has spoken, and so have you.